Here we are today with our Ford Focus. We got an old Focus, 2000. Year 2000's got about a gabillion miles on it. The thing just won't die, but the valve cover gasket's leaking. It's leaking right onto this nice exhaust manifold, and it is making it stink. I think what happened is I changed the timing belt at 100,000 miles, and me being me, I didn't change the valve cover gasket. So these valve cover gaskets, when they get a little older, they dry up and oil can get by them. So this isn't the most relevant thing at 2000. I mean, this is a 100-year-old car. It's 13 years old. Who's kidding who? But most of these overhead cam vehicles, the transverse engine, the valve covers, you should be able to get them out, or the valve cover gasket, you should be able to change them pretty easily. They're not really too far in there. So as far as a project that it's a person can handle, if you have this problem on an older car, I mean, the car's only worth $1,000, let's say. I doubt it's worth that much. And you don't want to be taking it to an auto mechanic because this thing's smelling up the place, because they're going to charge you like, $300 to change a silly thing. So anyway, these older cars, this is a good time to work on a car if you're not really too into it. You're not very mechanical, because again, it's an older car. If you don't do it right, it's not like you're messing up a $30,000 car. You're only messing up a $1,000 car. But anyway, it shouldn't be too big of a deal. We're going to take these bolts out here, over there, here. Then we got a couple other ones here. We can take this right off and slide the valve cover out. So let me get started, and we'll get into it. Okay, I loosened all the bolts on this around the perimeter here. And one thing I just want to show you is, it's got spark plugs. And when you pull the spark plug wires off, no big deal. They're keyed by length. So when you pull them off and throw them over to the side like I did, the longest spark plug is going to go to cylinder number 4, or whatever it is, and maybe that's number 1. It even says it on there, probably. It'll say what number it is. But anyway, these spark plugs are keyed lengthwise. So if you throw them over to the left or to the side like I did, when you put them back, they only go one spot, so don't get wound up. And another thing is this valley here, on this car anyway, this is a double overhead cam. Blow all this stuff out with your air compressor before you start working on it, because you don't want that crud and corruption getting down in there, because sooner or later you're going to take a spark plug out and some of that's going to get in your engine. So before you get the rubber caps off, blow that stuff out of there real good and get a nice clean work area. So let me get at it a little bit more here. Here's another little helpful tip here. This is the new part. This is the new valve cover gasket I got for this car. And what I would recommend doing before you get too deep is, when you buy your valve cover gasket for whatever car you're buying this for, just throw it on top there and make sure it looks like the right thing. Last thing you want to do is buy a part at the auto parts store, rip your whole engine apart, and guess what? It ain't for it. That stinks. I mean, then you got to put it back together, because you're probably going to have to take it to work. Most people have cars that they need them. It's not like they have a couple extra laying around. So just take a look at the part you're getting and say, that looks pretty close. I can sort of see these humps are going to probably go over here, and I'm sort of guessing this thing goes over there, and the bolts all line up, so I'm good to go. I know with these Focuses, I'm not sure about other ones, this model, this SE model, every time I buy parts for it, it is an experience. Brake rotors don't fit, brakes don't fit. I don't know why, because it was a middle year thing, and I'm sure all cars are like that. With brakes, for instance, I'll take the brake pads or the rotors off and actually take them to the parts store to make sure what I'm picking up is the right thing. This, you're not going to take the valve cover gasket out. You sort of got to buy this stuff blind. Hopefully you got the right part. So anyway, just a little tip. I always try to do it. I don't always do it, but just make sure that the part you're putting in is the right part before you start tearing everything apart. Okay, so the old Ford Focus did it to me again. I checked the part before I took it apart. It looked like the right one, but it was not the right one. If you remember what the other one looked like, it was real thick. It even came with grommets. They gave me two options for this car. Two double overhead cams. I guess there must have been a year difference or something. I have no idea. But I buy all my parts at Advanced Auto, and they're very good with returns like that. So luckily this was in stock. So I just returned it and got it. So no big deal. So that's good stuff. Now just to show you what happens to these gaskets, you notice this one over here, the new one, the blue one, it's nice and spongy and flexible, all that good stuff. When these gaskets get with oil after a while, they get old and hard and brittle. And that's exactly what's going on here. This end here is very brittle. It'll probably break. Yep, it just snapped right there. So what happens is it doesn't have any bounce left to keep the oil, inside the head itself. So anyway, it seeps out, and again, it gets on the intake manifold in here, and it's a hell of a smell. Even if it's an old car, I know it doesn't have a bunch of years left in it, but that's just a terrible smell. So I'm replacing the valve cover gasket to get it done with. So let me clean this up. I already cleaned this up, just took a rag to it and cleaned the crud and corruption off around there where the gasket's going to go. I'll clean this groove out now and place the blue gasket in its place. So pretty exciting.
Okay, so that's about it. I got the gasket in there. I cleaned the groove out where the gasket goes. Flipped it over. Just when you're putting this thing back in, be aware that you don't want to get that gasket, you don't want to push it out of its groove trying to get it back in. So once you get it back in, just attempt to seat it. You'll be able to see if it's sitting out of flat or something. Because again, if the gasket is jumped out of its groove, you're going to have to take it back off and get it corrected. So we'll torque these bolts down. There's a vacuum hose here. Don't forget to put that on. And again, this is an old Ford Focus, but most overhead cam 4-cylinder transverse engines should be about the same as to replace the valve cover gasket. And if you have it long enough like us, I think if this has a 170 or 160,000 miles on, you'll get a leak. And maybe the smartest thing to do is if you ever change the timing belt like I did, replace it then, because sooner or later it's going to go bad. So hope you enjoyed this video, and work on your car. What the heck? A lot of fun.